Hello, and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. We all know that life is hard, right? It's messy, it's unpredictable, but it can be wonderful all at the same time. My hope is that we can take a deep dive into self-development topics and explore life's lessons through book clubs, conversations, and interviews. And together, we can uncover the lessons that others have already learned to help us navigate this crazy, wonderful ride called life. Hello and welcome to Message in the Middle. I'm your host, Marianne, and my guest today is Ranbir Puar. Ranbir is a TEDx speaker, author, clinical hypnotherapist, life strategies coach, and a nervous system architect who's been helping people transform their lives for more than a decade. She's spoken at international parenting summits alongside voices like Eckhart Tolle, and her work has been featured in Forbes and other publications around the world. She blends neuroscience, somatic regulation, neurofeedback, and mindset training to rewire both mind and body, creating breakthroughs where traditional coaching or talk therapy often plateau. In this episode, we'll explore how healing begins in the nervous system, why compassion is more effective than willpower, and how midlife can become a powerful turning point rather than a breaking point. If you've ever felt like you're doing all the right personal growth work but still feel stuck, this conversation may be just what you're looking for. Ranbir, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Marianne.
I'm glad to have you here today and to talk with you. As I was looking over some of your background and thinking about some of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, I thought it would be really great if we could start out with getting into a little bit more about you and your own story and sort of any notable experiences that shaped the work you're doing today before we get into all the science and tools and all that good stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My story is, I guess, a little interesting. I live in Vancouver, Canada, but I was born in India. And I was the fifth daughter in a row to my folks. And my parents had actually had a firstborn child who was a boy, and he passed away during childbirth. So my mom had many, many kids. And anyway, so I was the fifth daughter. And they moved to Canada when my mom was pregnant, and it turns out with my brother. And so I grew up hearing stories from cousins, not necessarily from my mom, but family members that would say things like, oh, we told them to leave you in India. They didn't need another daughter or another burden, as they headed to Canada, because in their model, and in many models at that time, because I'm 52. And so many of my friends across the board, all cultures, experience that gender bias towards women. At first, I thought it was only my culture, but I've now learned it's across the board. And so I grew up with that little bit of, not a little bit, a great deal of insecurity, and felt compelled to prove my worth. So I was that kid who was really diligent and worked really hard and would get the straight A's and get the awards and was the athlete and did the student government. Like across the board, did it all, was in the newspapers. But it didn't matter what I did. I was still never my brother.
Yeah.
And that chip I carried over that for so long, and how it became my fuel and my pattern and my program, and it allowed me to go really into this victim mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And because I was using that negativity as my fuel, like I'll show them, and we have to be honest and know that our hardships can be fuel.
Absolutely.
Right? I think a lot of people overlook that we actually can become addicted to that type of fuel. And then, I had a rough upbringing, and we were immigrants. So I've worked since I was little, so I have a really good work ethic, a really strong relationship with my mom, who sadly passed in 2013. But I happen to also naturally have a level of guts, and I challenged my dad. I challenged the norms, and I was the first person. My sisters had like different types of education, but I was the first one to get a university degree in my family, and I constantly pushed the boundaries because I felt compelled, I think, on some level to do that. But I did really was locked into that. I'm a survivor. I had a hard life. I had abuse. I had this and that. And then I met my now husband who drove me bananas because he made me challenge all of that stuff. Because that, like, what? Like, that is the fabric of my being. How would you ask me to shift my perspective on that? And thank goodness for that, because it allowed me to get out of the weeds. And I call it the mountain of perspective. So it was right there at the bottom, in the thick of it all the time. And then I slowly learned how to go up the mountain part way, could have a little bit more perspective, and then make my way to the top where I had a bird's eye view of what would be possible for me if I chose to release this type of mindset and maybe incorporate this other way of thinking where everything was happening for me, not to me. That was really revolutionary for me. It's a big shift.
Yeah.
And then it was becoming a mother. In 2004, I had my first son, and his name is Isaac. And then my second son in '07, Asher. But when Isaac was born, I was such a businesswoman, I just assumed it'll be fine. I'm going to have a baby. I'm writing, the corporate plan for the next year, and everybody can, you just go back to work. And as soon as I met him, I couldn't leave him. I just, there was something, I don't know, divine happened where I thought that this is not, nope, I need to stay with this baby. And so I left my work and tried to become a stay-at-home. Well, I did become a stay-at-home mom. I had to learn how to make like a whole new way of living.
Being. Yeah.
And being. But, oh my gosh, when I looked at him, I just knew I couldn't let the storms that brewed inside of me descend on my baby. It gave me an opportunity to just dig so deep into what it is that I wanted to be and feel and create in the world for him, for me. And it created that new happy childhood for me. So I got to have this really deep, deep healing, as trite as that sounds. Them being the mirrors back. And then, of course, when Asher was born, I just didn't think I could love anymore. And then he came along, and I just realized, holy smokes, this human heart.
It's infinite.
It's infinite.
Yeah.
It's so capable. And I just never even imagined in my wildest dreams, Marianne, that if someone had told me that I could have this level of peace and love in my life based on how I grew up.
Yeah.
Because I left a lot out of that story, that I could have this, I wouldn't have believed them. I would have called them a liar. And knowing that it could happen for me makes me know in every cell of my being that every person is capable of having this level of peace.
So I have to just say, as an aside, it's so wild to me that you had two boys. It's just ironic, right? It's just a little ironic. But that aside, so you talked about that victim mentality. You were in that for a while, and how we can all get in that for a while.
Absolutely.
But I've heard you also talk about how we have to stop asking what's wrong with us and instead start asking what happened to us. So elaborate on that a little bit, because it sort of makes me stop and question, because those two things could seem at odds. Like if we're focusing on the what happened to us, isn't that bringing us into that victim mentality?
Well, absolutely. I think that it's important to acknowledge what happened to us. And the key part of that phrase is happened, past tense, and not happening. But if you look at one of the definitions of trauma that I quite like and lands for me, is that trauma is something that happens too fast, too soon, too much, or too little for too long, or too much for too long. So if you're looking at it from that perspective, that, and also trauma doesn't have a date stamp. So if we keep into this story of happening, that's what, how it unfolds. We can't get out of the thick of it. But if we can create just even a small pause to realize it's whatever the date is today, and allow your body to integrate to that date, it gives some distance between when that event happened and what's happening for you now. So we create a little distance, and in that distance, we can create some reflection and understanding that it's not right now happening to us. But it's layered and complex,
Yeah.
for sure, and it's the basis of my work. But it's important to really become aware of the questions that we ask, like what happened, and oftentimes we think, well, why did that happen? And then our pattern and program answers that with whatever we believed when that thing happened.
Yeah.
Versus our adult self that knows, well, that wasn't your fault, little girl. That was out of your control. It's answered from the little girl who was doing her best.
With very limited tools.
Very limited tools. They're not even,
or none.
None.
Or none.
Yeah. And it's just a fascinating journey to be able to go back and observe those things from a place of safety.
Mm.
But it requires skill. It requires support. Otherwise, what can happen is the re-traumatization piece and all of that. But when you can get to that place where it says, okay, that happened, not happening, then I think we have to start deconstructing some of the myths of healing. Mm. And one of the myths I sort of deconstructed and faced head on is this one around forgiveness. Oh, if I forgive, then I can get better. And when I looked at that, and I wrote about this a long time ago, I realized that is a false ask of myself, because I can ask myself to forgive things that I could do. But to ask me to forgive something I could never do to another human being is really, truly mixed up and messed up. And so shifting to acceptance instead of asking myself to forgive really moved the needle for me.
I get that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of us are asked to carry the burden of our abusers. And really, truly, we should just ask to accept that we were in that situation and that happened to us. But it's their responsibility to carry the load of the mistakes they made, not ours. And that one particular piece, like I said, in my deconstructing of it all, shifted a lot for me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And there is a big difference between the two, forgiving and accepting, for sure.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the word that you hit on a couple times. You used the phrase around safety, feeling safe and being safe in your body.
Right.
And for many of us at our age, we're a similar age, you're a little bit younger than me, but we've lived a lot of our life in this fight, flight, and freeze mode. Many of us, we didn't even realize that for a long time. Maybe still don't even realize that. So how do you even begin to step out of that? Like, how do you get people to have that awareness and then to start sort of shifting that?
Oh, really good question. Outside of a therapeutic model, like if you were just kind of going out and about, and I think it's really, really important to do audits. So we audit, well, actually, we're encouraged not to audit anything anymore. Don't look at your bank account, don't look at your scale. Don't look, it'll make you feel bad. Well, really, as a human, you are incredibly resilient.
Yes.
And that nervous system of yours is so wise and resourceful that when you were little, it learned that if you were extra productive, you wouldn't get in trouble. It's adaptive.
Yes.
How brilliant is it? I get goosebumps thinking about how blessed we are with this nervous system that was trying to create safety. It only has the date wrong. It has the date from the 80s for us, maybe, or the
Yeah,
70s.
70s. Yeah.
Some of the people listening, maybe it's,
Yeah. Anywhere in
10
there.
years ago, anywhere in
It's
that
not
range.
current. It's not current. That's the big
It's
key,
not
right? Yeah.
current. It's not current. So the goal is to bring your mind and body into the date that we are living now. There's an old saying that says the longest distance in the world is from the head to the heart. And when we can plug that head back into the body and start listening to the messages of the body, it is so wise. And so it's sitting with that feeling when you're activated. So you might somebody says something to you and all of a sudden you feel nauseous. Rather than saying nausea, go away, you're going to sit and say, okay, I'm going to sit with this nausea because it has information for me, and maybe put your hands on your throat or your belly and just checking in with the body, because the body is reacting physically in order to give you data. And then when we can sit and pause, even for that split second, we create space.
Yeah.
And in that space, we can create a whole bunch of change. And then we can actually question the old memory. There's something I use in my practice called memory reconsolidation, where we can bring it, like that activation happens. And in that pause, we can actually challenge that old memory and that old story with proof of from today, that that's no longer the truth. It's complex, but there's all these possibilities.
Tell me if this matches your experience, because the more I talk about this topic, the more I sort of validate that. I guess I don't know how to put the right terms in it, but just because we have a memory, just because something sort of created a perspective that we carried forward, it isn't necessarily true that the person, I'm trying to say it without an example, but it doesn't necessarily mean that your mother always thought you were not enough. You interpreted that. You came up with that story, potentially. There are certainly parents out there that are horrible and tell their kid they're not enough and they're not good. But I'm talking about just how I keep realizing over and over and validating that we take these messages forward that we put emotion into at some point. We interpret it into something at some point. So I guess when we're doing that audit, that's probably part of it. Like where did this really even first come from?
So
does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. And it's true and valid what you're saying, because sometimes the two people, even if you think about arguments you might have had in the recent past or disagreements with people, the perspectives might be entirely different and you're in the same room. And so what one person might think is, oh, I just paused and looked away from my kid for a moment, the kid might interpret as, my mom doesn't want to see me.
Yes. Yes, good example. Yes.
Right. And so there's layers and layers and layers there, and it depends on what's the foundation that was there. So a look away from somebody who's built a solid foundation with child and can co-regulate and all of that, that's not going to be interpreted that way. But when the child, when they're co-regulating, can't get safety from the parent, then that look away is going to be like, I'm not wanted. So it's more than the one moment. I think it's a buildup from, in utero, even for some situations where I've had clients that were given up for adoption after birth, and the pattern goes back. The nervous system work goes all the way back there. And clinical hypnotherapy can take us all the way back at that subconscious level to do deep healing there. And then the shifts happen in the present. But it is true. And also, we don't always remember things as they happen.
Right.
Especially when we're little.
Right.
So it's layered, but it's a beautiful journey to explore it if you're doing it with the right support.
So it makes me think of, one of my favorite words recently has been, I say recently, but it's probably been all year, last year, around unlearning, right? I think when we get into midlife, we do so much unlearning. And part of it is what we just talked about, sort of unlearning all those patterns and beliefs and maybe things that we interpreted. But I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, I know you also say that like healing isn't about what we become next. It's about remembering who we truly are.
Mm,
And I think that ties into my unlearning. Those things are sort of the
yeah.
same thing. But then when I thought about you and you said, when you were like 7 years old, that's a really young point in time. Do we even know who we really are at that point? If you started shifting as early as 6, 7, 8 years old, I don't know. Do we really know?
I'm not normal by any means. Yeah, I'm not normal by any means. And most kids that age aren't going to have the kind of thoughts I had at that age. I can't explain it, but I kind of looked around and I thought, oh no,
Mm,
I need something different. But I was really obsessed with learning also at that young age. And so by no means is that a standard. But what can happen is that we just get into patterns and rhythms. And until we pause
hmm.
or until we hit a wall, most
Yes.
often, most people don't hear the whispers. So you're going to hear the whisper, then the knock on the door, then the door gets knocked down, then the house gets burnt down. And most people are addressing it while the house is burning down.
Yes.
And that's not to go and create this upheaval in your life. That's not the suggestion or the recommendation. It is basically trying to get quiet enough to hear the whispers.
Hmm.
And you can start that by auditing thoughts when you're doing mundane tasks. I mean, that's not new information, but you can do that when you're brushing your teeth, folding laundry, washing dishes, driving, becoming really aware of what is it that you're thinking or feeling in your body
Hmm.
when you're doing those basic tasks, because they tend to be the door that leads to the deeper story.
You're really big on auditing.
Huge.
So I was going to ask you about, and you've brought it up twice, so we might
Yeah,
as well go there. I was
sure.
going to sort of wait and see if we had time, but you talked about two specific auditing thought processes that I would love to touch on. The first, I think you just hit on and did the previous question as well, which is more of an internal audit, but you talked about auditing your internal dialogue.
Hmm.
And you talked about it in terms of three gates that we
Yes.
should
Yes.
evaluate. And I
Yes.
loved that.
Thank you.
Can you elaborate on that so that our
Absolutely.
listener can hear some of those
Absolutely.
questions you should ask yourself?
Absolutely. There is an old Sufi saying, and it's meant to be between conversations between two people. But I feel that if you're not congruent, then what's the point of worrying about what's outside of you? Start with you.
Yeah.
And so the saying goes, before you speak, let your words pass through these three gates. Is it true? Is it kind? And is it necessary? Super powerful. And so if you become aware of the stuff you say to yourself, quite often and on average, most of the things we say to ourselves are going to be unkind, harsh, very harsh, but so much unnecessary stuff. It's filler. It's filler. It's filler. And so it's super important also then to question what is true. Because I could make a list of things that I feel like I should improve. But if I showed some of my closest friends that list, they would laugh at it. They would say, that's not true. That's not true. That's not true. You have this. And so I think that's why relationships are important, because they can give you some feedback and some
Mhm.
emotional bolstering that we might need to be challenged. Because in today's world, it's not the world you and I grew up in, but in today's world, people are so afraid to give feedback or
Yeah.
support or constructive feedback that everyone's just quiet. And then we're just alone and functioning in these silos. But if you can start to audit your own inner dialogue and say, what's the end game here? Who am I trying to satisfy by being unkind to myself or telling myself these lies or telling myself all this unnecessary stuff so I stay stuck? Who is that actually serving?
Hmm.
It's probably some pattern of safety that was created decades ago. And then you have to ask yourself, do I still need that today? Is that serving me? One of the things I like to tell people to do is to talk to yourself. And so ask, is this moving me towards freedom?
Whatever freedom is.
Is this thought or feeling, whatever freedom is to you, because you inherently know what that is for you.
But it's different for everybody.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Holy moly, is it ever? And so if you ask that question, is this moving me towards freedom over and over and over again, you don't have to do anything else. That'll interrupt the subconscious program with a conscious thought that'll say, WTF.
Yeah.
You need to think something different. And then it'll offer you choices from the menu.
Yeah.
Rather than forcing. Sorry.
No. You said rather than forcing it. Yeah. And I was just going to say that is often enough to shift the pattern, to the pause, the intentionality of, asking yourself that question. And when I say it's often enough, and you'll back me on this, I'm sure, that doesn't mean you get quote unquote fixed, because for one, you're not broken. But these patterns are tough. They've been built over a lot of years. It doesn't mean you ask yourself that once and then it's gone. This is something that it lessens, right? The more you do it, it lessens.
Absolutely. Repetition is the mother of skill. The more you can train the brain to start asking those type of questions, the more you'll move forward. There's a saying by Diane Ackerman. So if you've listened to me speaking on other things, you'll probably heard it before, but she says, when I get to the end of my life, I want to know that I lived the width of it, not just the length of it. And if we look at today's world, we're racing through everything, racing through pain and racing through joy, both. Yeah. And most of it is because the systems have conditioned us to believe that if we slow down and pause, the sky will fall.
Yes.
The sky is going to fall.
Yes.
Again, they're trying to convince us we are not resilient, because a resilient person is not going to be a good customer. It's really hard to sell somebody who's self-regulated and feels good in their own skin. It's the other bits that sell the products and the clothes and all the things. And so what I suggest is that pause is like going wide. Go wide into the pain, because if you don't, that same lesson, I promise you, comes back in a different form, and usually not that far down the road. So you might be able to grit and get through it, but then it's going to show up again. But if we go wide to the edges and have faith that you're capable, because you are resilient, you are human after all, and pick up those lessons, then it's like going into Donkey Kong. You get to go to the next level, right? You're not going to be stuck on the same level over and over and over again. But the same goes for the joy. Gosh, we rush through joy. And so if you just let yourself go wide and celebrate, in celebration, actually, the brain creates integration. And that's where new neural pathways are made. But because of old patterns and old programs, we rush through that even. And because we rush through that, the brain doesn't register the win.
Let's talk about that a little bit more, because one of the things I wanted to ask you about was joy, because I feel like so many of us get out of touch with joy. We don't know what lights us up. We don't know what makes us feel good after so many years. We sort of just get numb, I think, to a lot of it. So rushing through it, I get it. You're right. I think we rush through everything. But what about those people that can't even find it anymore, that don't even know how to tap into it?
Well, generally, the people that can't find it even in a little bit have a program that says it's unsafe and dangerous to pause. Keep moving in order to stay safe. And so that individual actually feels burnout is safer than the pause, because at least the burnout was earned. Right? And so that individual or those types of people genuinely it's almost intervention level. Like if we're looking at the layers of intensity, where you might have to have people around you that have pattern interrupts or reminders for you. But I also have one question that I have my clients put into their calendar, and in the beginning, 3 times a day. And because I'm not a big believer in gratitude lists, because I feel like you can lie through those.
She said, lie, lie.
Liar. You can lie through those. So because I am the way my brain works is I can always find a shortcut, which is the best thing for my clients, because then at least I know how they're going to try to cheat. Right? I'm just kidding. But because I like shortest like path to the reward. And in the past, I'd always have to keep repeating it because it was never the shortest path. But now I understand it a lot better. But if you ask questions, they can allow you to pause and find joy. And the question is this: why is my life so great? So counterintuitive for most people. Because even when I ask that sometimes of people, I can feel the visceral reaction of discomfort.
Sure, especially if there's somebody that's in the middle of crisis or whatever, something major, right?
Yeah, or they're conditioned to believe life is bad.
Yeah.
And bad things happen to me no matter how good I am or how hard I try. And the beautiful thing about using questions, and I've actually created a system this year. Instead of having a word for the year, you create a question for the year in my book called The Rhythm. It's a workbook. So giving up the word, because that's a full stop. Whereas a question is curious. And when you're curious, you cannot be stressed. They can't coexist in the brain. So if you ask, why is my life so great? Your brain in the beginning might not have too many great answers for that. But give it a week, give it 66 days, give it time. And all of a sudden, it'll feel like a breath of fresh air every time you see that pop up in your calendar, because you will have genuine answers that put you in a state of gratitude, that not fake gratitude list.
Why do you think they can't fake that?
Because it's a question. So it's really hard to sit there and say, I'm grateful for the sun rising. Yeah, Oprah can do it. She's a billionaire and has like a lot of other bonuses. But for the average human, that's hard to do. But if I say, why is my life so great? Today, my answer could be because my dog is like adorable and she climbs up on me and she gives me this little cuddle at the time that I normally wake up, and that she wakes up just before I do in order to give me kisses to wake up. Something so small.
Yeah, but you answered it in a way that was trying to paint the picture.
That's what the brain does.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm trying to point out, because at first I was like, well, I think it's just a shift, because I think you could say the same answers, but I get your point. I think it makes you naturally elaborate versus just throwing out a word.
Yeah. It'll start to, in the beginning, there might be resistance, because if you start to say, why is my life so great? Then you got to give up the old habit that says my life isn't great.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're doing a 2 for 1.
Right. I think that's important. That's an important thing to point out, is it's a shift in perspective as well as.
Yeah. A state change.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
I want to stick here for a minute, because I was going to ask you about this word of the year versus question, because I definitely have folks that, do the vision boards, think about their words of the year, sort of plan their big intent for the year. And I really did like the thought around the question, because I think for some, I just think it changes the perspective, like we just said. So can you give a couple of examples of what that might look like as a shift from word of the year to a question of the year?
Sure. Well, you could think of the word of the year as abundance. That's my word of the year. And so that's just a word. And when my brain takes that in and out kind of thing, it's not going to create any conversation in my systems. Not automatically, right? Not automatically. But if I ask, what's the best choice for me that will create abundance in my life? Or what's the next best thing that I can do to create abundance? Or how can I allow abundance into my life? What happens is your brain's a supercomputer. It might not answer you right away, but it'll start to go to work for you because it's just been given a prompt.
Yeah.
And when you prompt the supercomputer, it's going to start spitting out, whether it's through the body. You might notice in your body, you might get a shift or a signal, or you might get creative downloads, or you might get inspiration, or all of a sudden, because you're asking the question and the brain is electric, produces enough electricity to power a small light bulb, you are automatically changing your state and what you're emitting. Then all of a sudden, that concept of quote unquote manifestation comes into play, and like attracts like. And then all of a sudden, that curiosity opens up its expansion. So questions create expansion, and words create contraction.
Yeah. And I think you have to, somebody that's well trained in doing the work, I'll say generally,
Yes.
can take that word and go there. They know to take
100%.
the word, and then they need
Yep.
to go have the exercises of what does this mean? What does this look like? How
Yes.
does it fit into these core areas of my life? That's the work. But I think what you're suggesting is great for somebody that hasn't practiced this over and over and over, because it automatically makes you do the work. It automatically takes your brain to that place of thinking through, how does this fit? What does this look like? What does it mean?
And including all possibilities, because I would challenge you, even on the person that knows the work, that the word is limited to their knowledge.
That's fair.
Their conscious knowledge. Whereas the question allows you to access your supercomputer, and you might get information that you didn't perceive before you started.
That's fair.
So it opens up a little bit more possibility, even for the well-versed self-helper.
Yeah.
It opens another door and another door.
Yeah, I definitely like that twist. I think it'll be a great exercise for folks that haven't tried it before. Yeah. And we talking about all these ways that people, can do personal development, self-help, those kind of things. And I know that one of the things that you have said, or I think that one of the things you have said is that sometimes these personal development tools around mindset, they don't work. They stop working for people. Am I misinterpreting what you said there, or what is the belief around that?
Well, mindset work, which I do a lot of, is about sort of 5% of your brain power. So that's called a top-down model. We're using the conscious mind to try to rejig things to impact the rest of your systems. And it's very powerful and can work brilliantly at different times. But we also have to have the bottom-up approach, which is the somatic, the nervous system, the polyvagal, all the stuff you hear about now. I've been doing this work since 2009. So for me, it's oh, wow, now everyone's talking about this is great, right? Like more people will heal.
Mainstream now,
mainstream now. But when you look at that bottom up approach, again, it comes back to that conversation between the heart and the mind. More information. If you look at some of the research shows our heart is intuitive, and research shows that it sends more signals to the brain than the other way around. So when we can also get in the bottom up and work from, brainstem to cortex and using different techniques, we just become more expansive. But mindset work has its place absolutely in the world, because our conscious mind can create incredible change for us.
So I imagine then that's where things like neurofeedback and your safe and sound protocol and all those kinds of things come into play. Yes. And I would say push the dime a little bit more than just straight talk therapy even.
Yes. You can't bypass them. So you can't outthink, for example, the safe and sound protocol. What we're doing is introducing safety to the inner ear muscles and bones, and you just can't outthink it as long as it's done properly and safely. You just have massive shifts and changes in the autonomic nervous system, which creates space for your mindset work. When your body and your nervous system are in safety, oh my gosh, the expansion you can have and the way that the mindset work lands is incredible. But we can't ignore the body.
So coupled, it's so much more powerful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I could
Absolutely.
see that.
Because we're more than just the brain and or the conscious brain, and it allows us to connect to that whole system.
I mean, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
I think that that piece probably doesn't get enough play, if you will. It doesn't get enough press. I think we talk a lot about the mindset work. We talk a lot about, and I guess that makes sense because people are that are into personal development. There's a lot you can do there on your own, where sometimes you
Yes.
need a little more help to go in the other direction.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But if you look at ancient practices and almost any sort of, I'm going to call it indigenous culture, China, India, wherever, because a lot of the tools I used from the get-go were somatic based and from, the homeland.
Yeah.
So even though I'm Canadian, I don't think I've been to
I
India
know what you
once, and
mean.
I've just, I gotta throw a joke in there.
The
Um,
roots, the roots, though.
the roots. But you could, I don't know if you've ever gone into like an Asian market and you've seen some of the older ladies, they walk around and they're tapping their arms.
Yes.
And if you look into that just a little bit, it's called body drumming. And if you actually just start from the bottom of your foot and start tapping your body, even that, as silly as it looks and as ridiculous as it sounds, as I say it out loud, it helps you reconnect with the somatic piece of you. And then that body goes, oh, hey, I'm not ignored. Do you know how many people don't even think about their feet at all, ever?
So
Until something,
interesting.
right? When you start to just, even if you start putting your attention on your feet right now as you listen to my voice,
Yeah.
all of a sudden you might feel a little tingling at the bottom of your feet, or your toe might say, ouch. That's as simple as that can be a practice on how you start waking up the connection between the body and the mind.
It makes me think of, and I'm sure you're familiar or at least have heard of, there's a technique called havening that's getting a
Yes.
lot of attention. I have a
Yes.
fellow podcaster, Hilary Russo, and she trains people on havening. And it's
Right.
when you talked about the women tapping themselves, it made me think
Yeah.
of, and the way, it's just you rub your hands like you're going to wash them, and then you can rub your face and up and down your arms. And it's all a way of
Yeah.
calming you down and making you connect back
Yeah.
into yourself and into your safety. I would have never thought about the people historically way back when and tapping their arms, but sort of now I could see they're so that's such a
Yeah.
parallel that's probably the same type of practice.
Yeah. They're doing it intuitively or based on their
Yeah.
patterns and programs from their
Yeah.
culture. And havening is great. And it's been around a long time and it's having a little heyday, which is amazing.
Yeah.
But especially for little ones, it's such a great technique to just rub your hands, up and down shoulder to elbow and just, really doing that gentle technique. And there's different, I use it in a different way where I include eye movement with it, and we can move a lot through techniques like that, but they're old techniques and they're wonderful. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
they belong to all of us.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you one more thing that ties to some of the research I did before we sort of wrap up, but we didn't get to it naturally, so I'm going to ask anyway. You talk about, again, another audit. You talk about a communication
Yeah.
audit and asking yourself as to whether you're instructional or inspirational in the way you communicate.
Yes.
And I thought, wow, that's
Absolutely.
such a great thing to think about. Explain why that matters and what that looks like, because I just think it's fabulous to be self-aware in that way.
Well, thank you. I think that my husband and we do a lot of big thinking together. We challenge each other, and that's something that had come up a long time ago, just in how we were assessing communication. And if you look at how, and often people ask like about the success of our relationship. We met when I was, 24, he was 27, 28. So we've been together 30 years, which is kind of unheard of in this day and time. But so one of the questions people asked is about the longevity and how, and it's about auditing how we communicate. And so it's really important in every relationship to have some instructional conversation. Did you take out the garbage? Can you buy the milk?
Yes. Task
Amazing.
oriented. Yes.
Gotta happen.
Yes.
Task oriented. I call it task talk. But if you audit your communication and the majority of your conversation is task talk, then how much space do you have for connection and exploration and getting to know one another, or even fostering each other's dreams or desires or creativity? So asking, especially with kids, like, did you do your homework? Did you? And on and on and on. Whereas if you keep your task talk controlled, limited, then you allow yourself to be challenged to go look for what other questions comes back to the question, because questions create curiosity, and curiosity creates expansion, not just in the brain, but in relationship. And so when you can ask a question like, what was the most challenging part of that for you? Or how can I help you? It looks like you really, really want to do this. What is it? Can I offer any help? Or have you thought about this? I'm confused. I thought it meant this. Can you tell me if I'm seeing it right? Right? Like, there's so many ways to open up and foster communication, because communication is the backbone of human connection. And most communication is nonverbal. So please watch the eye rolls. Watch, right? And it's because there's something called neuroception. Our nervous systems are reading each other. So, we're reading from that level because we are very, very complex as humans. And so you could say, but I never said that. But you did say it.
Yeah.
You said it.
Yeah.
Your body language said it. So, because if you only have task talk, it leads to what I call indifference. And when you have indifference in a relationship, that relationship is functionally dead. You could take it or leave it. And that's not what you're meant to experience here.
Love that. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I really love that idea.
Thank you.
I always like to ask everybody as a wrap up, if you could only leave one message, maybe it's one question. What would you leave? What would you say?
Well, if I had to leave one question today, because I've already given you why is my life so great, I would ask this one, which I used last year. And you can, you don't have to believe in God. You can substitute that word for whatever it is that you believe. But the question that I think is quite interesting and was quite eye-opening for me last year is, what would I receive if I allowed God to support me? Mm-hmm. And so you could say, what would I receive if I allowed, and you could put your partner's name to support me.
The universe, whatever.
The universe, spirit, or like a person. Yep. Because maybe there's a person in your life that's trying to connect with you and you're just... No.
Yeah.
I don't trust you.
Or I do it all on my own. I don't need help, right?
Yes,
Maybe
I don't need help. So you could use a version of that question. And I'm not going to say it's life-changing, but it's altering. And it makes the brain start to look for ways that you can allow support in.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of your insight with us. And we'll put all of your links. I know you have some really great trainings out there, and we'll be sure to put your links in the show notes. Where are you most active? Where would you send people if they're trying to kind of see what you have to say?
I had taken a pause from social media for 3 years, but because my content had reached about that year was like around 40 million people, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is too soon. I still have kids in school.
Yeah, it's a lot.
I need to pause. I was writing every week, but I'm starting to get active again, and so Instagram.
Okay.
I'll post there, and I'm starting to try to make TikTok, and I don't dance or do any singing.
Oh man.
I don't have that down yet. But I'm going to try to make more video content. And to me, the purpose of social media is to provide information and tools and resources rather than only for plugs. Yeah. If you follow my work, you'll notice that I very rarely ask you to sign up for anything. And I use it as a way to create access. So I think that's super important. So Instagram, and I I can't remember. I think my handle is my first name underscore my last name, but I'm not 100%.
I'll put it
I'm
out
not
there.
100% sure. But I wanted to say, Marianne, an observation is that I'm really grateful for the time and effort you put into looking into my work. It means a lot to me that you put that effort in. It's very unique, and I just am really, really grateful for that. And I wanted to say thank you.
Oh,
That
well,
says a
thank
lot about
you.
your
Thank you
about your podcast.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for appreciating it. I really think it's important to make sure, that the guests that I bring on are the folks that I think will connect and will bring, messaging that will be helpful. And I'm a lifelong learner myself. So I love to do the research because I learned stuff out of it as well. So, but thank you for noticing that and noticing that it was impactful.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
And I appreciate you. Thank you for joining me today. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode of Message in the Middle. I hope you found something in this conversation that reminded you that you're not alone and that midlife isn't about winding down. It's about waking up. You're not done. You're just becoming. If this episode speaks to you at all, please share it with a friend who needs to hear it. And if you're enjoying the show, I'd be so grateful if you could take a moment to leave a review. It really helps other women find this community and this podcast. Until next time, take care of yourself.